Good morning. I'm pleased to call to order this hearing of the Legislative Branch Subcommittee of the Committee on Appropriations. This is our 7th oversight hearing on the Capitol Visitor Center project, and we have a number of different things that we're going to try to accomplish in today's hearing. But first, I want to congratulate Mr. Wamp on the successful passage of his legislation to designate the almost formerly known as the Great Hall, Emancipation Hall. That's been a long and hard-fought effort, and you are to be congratulated along with Mr. Jackson. We have been using these hearings for the last 8 months to try to assist the architect of the Capitol in his operation in getting more focused and directed and organized at goal setting and accomplishing those goals. And I am really proud of the work that we've all done together to get the CVC project back on track and moving towards those goals. And so, since I know some news is going to be announced today, I'm really pleased that we have been able to help bring about that news. Tomorrow is November 15th, and there was a substantial completion date that the architect was working towards, and I know that, that we're going to hear from the architect about the results of that, and I'm really pleased that we were able to help you move towards that goal and accomplish it. We were able to help you negotiate that goal. I think the hearings and meetings that we've had privately and publicly with the contractors have helped in A, establishing the substantial completion date, and B, in helping you reach it. There's been a renewed sense of urgency, and with Mr. Unger coming on board as the project director, having the GAO side with the project side as a balance and an understanding and a history of the project, I think that's helped tremendously as well. So we have a lot of big accomplishments and a lot left to accomplish. We don't have any moving targets anymore. We've been hitting those targets, and I'm really excited about that. I want to spend some time on the operations side in the subcommittee this morning. We are able to start to move towards understanding how the CVC is going to be operating, get a handle on what the costs of those operations will be, but also we have some very significant interest in specifics. For example, we'll spend a great deal of time on the issue of staff-led tours during this hearing. We will continue to have these oversight hearings until right up until opening day. Because I think that they're incredibly important in terms of accountability and making sure that we can keep track and a close watch on the appropriation side of things, because obviously we want to responsibly spend the people's funding. And with that, Mr. Wamp, if you have any comments?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you very much for your courtesies this morning, the kind words, and actually your support through the whole process and encouragement. It meant a whole lot. You're a class act and very, very diligent and effective chairwoman, and I'm grateful for our friendship. I think we have made a good team this year. I'm very proud of this team that's sitting in front of us. Not that our work is complete, but that this is where it gets really exciting for all of us, and I think this team has really gelled well together through the year. And the chair and I are both very proud to be part of this team. We've got a lot of important work to do together between here and next November, but I think we're going to be proud of the final product. I would say, while complimenting everyone, and especially our chairperson, that above her pay grade here, I am concerned about the further we slip into the fiscal year across the board of legislative branch responsibilities here that we're operating on last year's funding levels. And the sooner that we can get the United States Senate to act so that we can get this bill moved to conference, the legislative branch appropriations bill, the better off we're all going to be. And I am concerned, spending a lot of time with the Capitol Police lately, about funding items that are very important, and this money needs to move, and the quicker we can do it, the better. And I just want that on the record, because we need to encourage our friends on the other side of the dome to catch up with us so we can get this work done just as soon as possible. And with that, Madam Chairman, again, I want to thank you for all your cooperation through the whole process and encouragement that you've given me, which really meant a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome. We are a good team. I really agree with you, and it's been a pleasure to work with you since the beginning of this year. This morning, I'd like to introduce our witnesses. We're going to hear from Stephen Ayers, the acting architect of the Capitol, as we always do, Bernie Unger, the CVC project executive, Terry Dorn, the Director of Physical Infrastructure Issues at GAO. For the first time, testifying in front of the committee, Terry Rouse, the new CEO for Visitor Services at the CVC, and Chief Philip Morse, the Chief of the Capitol Police. Ms. Rouse, it's a pleasure to be able to work with you, and welcome to the subcommittee. Congratulations on your new position. And Mr. Ayers and the other people assembled who have a statement, they'll all be entered into the record. And you're welcome to present a summary of your statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Congressman Wamp. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the progress of the Capitol Visitor Center again. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the people at the table with me and thank them for their collaborative and cooperative team effort, not only to build the CVC, but to ensure its safe, memorable, and educational visitor experience when it opens. Of course, you noted Bernie Unger, our CVC project executive, and Ms. Terry Rouse, the newest member of the AOC team, our Chief Executive Officer for Visitor Services. I'm also pleased that my friend Chief Morse is here today to provide his expert testimony on the additional safety and security measures that visitors will receive as they arrive at the CVC. Madam Chair, since our last hearing, very good progress has been made, and we're 98% complete with this project. Over the next several months, we'll be working with this subcommittee and our other oversight committees to develop our operations budget for 2009. We expect as more visitors embrace the CVC and new programs and events are offered, we will need approximately $7.5 million in annual recurring costs for maintenance in fiscal year 2009, including 65 FTEs. This is included in the total operations budget that Ms. Rouse will talk about in a few moments. With the opening plan for November 2008, the current emphasis has been on startup activities, personnel, equipment, and inventory. As you know, the food service contract was awarded this spring, and I'm pleased to note that a contract for the development of the advanced reservation system and another contract for the CVC website were recently awarded as well. Having these contracts in place now, I believe, is a strong positive sign of forward progress on the operations front. Finish activities are well underway in all of the major public spaces within the CVC, and cleanup crews continue to prepare the interior space for the follow-on inspection process. In addition, the fire alarm subcontractor has completed the pre-testing activities, and we're on track to begin the first phase of our final acceptance testing as we promised on November 16th. The project team continues to work with the fire marshal to refine the scope and approach for completing the remaining phases of the fire and life safety acceptance tests in relationship to the overall project schedule and budget. We've also met with the General Services Administration to call upon their expertise in testing large institutional facilities to help us identify ways to perform the acceptance tests in a timelier, more efficient, and cost-effective manner. With GSA's assistance, we'll continue to look for ways to accelerate the work so we can ensure the receipt of a temporary certificate of occupancy next summer so that our operational activities can proceed with the final acceptance testing process being completed at the same time. I'm pleased to report that the contractor smoke control testing, which was scheduled to begin on October 19th, started ahead of schedule and was completed early. Completing the commissioning in a timely manner has been a concern of ours, GAO's, and this subcommittee's, as we've discussed in several previous hearings. However, our directive to our construction manager to add a commissioning expert to his team and our Sequence 2 contractors' increased focus have paid dividends as this entire process has been problem-free. Each day, the CVC takes on a more finished appearance, and we're completing the initial punch list inspections in several areas. A major indicator that construction work is coming to a close is the installation of bronze pin-mounted signage throughout the CVC. In the restaurant, crews continue to install servery trays, fixtures, and other stainless steel components, and professional cleaning crews continue to clean and polish equipment for the inspection process. With regard to the exhibition area, the finishing touches are being done to the 10-foot touchable model of the Capitol Dome, and it will be installed in the CVC by the end of this calendar year. In addition, benches and bronze railings were installed last week in the House and Senate virtual theaters. On the plaza deck, workers have completed the installation of precast concrete slabs around both skylights above the Great Hall. Later this month, masons are expected to begin installing the black granite slabs around the top of these concrete slabs. The installation of pavers is ongoing on the east front. Gilbane and RTKL continue to inspect the paver work as areas are completed. Work in the areas closer to the Capitol where pavers have been damaged during the course of construction is expected to begin early next spring. Madam Chair, overall, the contractor and Gilbane have completed the preliminary inspections and punch lists for all of the public spaces in the facility. RTKL is now performing follow-up inspections and expects to complete the formal punch list by the end of this month. We're completing the finishing touches on the facility and are proceeding toward the final acceptance testing of the fire and life safety systems. As you noted in your opening statement, we have a great team in place that's committed, results-oriented, and is focused on seeing the construction to its successful conclusion. That concludes my statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Mr. Dorn?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Wamp, Ms. McCollum. Since the last hearing, AOC and its contractors have moved the project forward, and the CVC is over 98% complete. In the main CVC, installation of final finishes is nearly finished, and building cleanup and polishing is continued. House and Senate expansion spaces are further behind than what I would expect for substantial completion, but the AOC is confident that areas are to the point where fire alarm acceptance testing will not be delayed by construction. We have not received an updated construction schedule from the AOC since the last hearing, so I'm not in a position to discuss progress along the critical paths. AOC and GAO are in agreement, however, that proceeding on the fire alarm testing is the project's critical path and its greatest risk to successful opening a year from now in November 2008. Fire alarm pre-testing has gone well, which is a credit to Manhattan and its subcontractors. The next stage of fire alarm acceptance testing, critical to opening the building next November, is not going well for 3 reasons. First, the fire alarm testing plan is still not finalized. There was a change to the fire alarm system's concept of operations just last week. Second, the fire alarm testing plan has not been coordinated with major stakeholders. As of last week, the Office of Compliance, for example, who has a major role in life safety on Capitol Hill, has not reviewed it. And lastly, the procedures for testing and the amount of testing and the time needed for testing are still not clear. For example, the uncertainty still surrounding the testing led to a very limited response the first time AOC requested proposals to assist with fire alarm testing, and that proposal was millions of dollars higher than expected. AOC has since revised their solicitation to recognize that uncertainty and has re-advertised for help. Bids were due yesterday. There is still open and mostly cordial disagreement between the CVC team and the fire marshal on what needs to be done. Millions of dollars in money on testing the fire alarm system is on the line. The architect of the Capitol, who in technical terms is the authority having jurisdiction, in consultation with the major stakeholders, such as the Office of Compliance, needs to make the tough call and rule how the testing will be performed. We're not suggesting that shortcuts be made when it comes to fire and life safety at the CVC. This is a case where the AOC has brought in multiple experts from outside organizations to help them find the right path through this mess. That makes sense. The qualified experts unfortunately disagree, and now the AOC, the lawful authority, needs to either acquiesce to his fire marshal's plan or modify that plan to align with his other fire protection consultants so they can get on with testing in the most efficient and cost-effective manner while adhering to the National Fire Protection Code. If this issue is not resolved by the AOC in the immediate future, the project schedule and subsequently its budget will still be at risk. That concludes my statement for this morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. Ms. Rouse?
Good morning. Madam Chair, Congressman Wamp, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today to talk about the Capitol Visitor Center and the wonderful visitor experience that awaits all those who come to the U.S. Capitol next year. First, I'd like to say what an honor and a privilege it is for me to be working here. I want to thank the acting architect, Stephen Ayers, the entire AOC staff, the House and Senate Oversight Committees, and the congressional leadership for their support and assistance over the past 8 weeks. I also want to acknowledge Tom Stevens, Director of Capitol Visitor Service, who has been working with me to prepare to train our staff for the new visitor experience in the CVC. I also want to thank Chief Philip Morris for working with me to ensure that our visitors are safe and secure during their visit. And I'd like to thank Congress for giving me the opportunity to be part of history, opening the doors of the largest expansions of the Capitol that is devoted to the citizens of the United States. I believe that the CVC is a symbolic door to the nation, a portal that will become an inviting place to remind visitors of their roles as citizens. As an expansion of the Capitol, it will provide a fitting welcome and introduction to the People's House, so they may witness the working of our legislative process. I've been on the job now for 8 weeks. I am very impressed with the planning and work that has been done before I arrived. Since coming to Washington, one of my top priorities is to hire a staff to help prepare the CVC to receive visitors. Other operational issues will be working with the congressional leadership on including the advanced reservation system, developing a CVC website, developing a transportation plan, and reaching out with a public information campaign. As the subcommittee is aware, under the current continuing resolution, our budget of $7.5 million covers basics, startup, operational costs, and does not include the Capitol Visitor Service. In the first full year of operation, FY09, the CVC operation budget will reflect salaries and benefits for all full-time staff in the Office of Visitor Services. In addition, we will be incurring costs associated with license fees for exhibit items, staff training, and visitor programming. As decisions are made over the next few months, such as operational hours, we will have a clearer picture on the costs associated with staffing needs, as will the Capitol Police. As this time, with a number of critical details still to be determined, we estimate that it will cost $25 to $35 million in FY09 to support CVC operations. Madam Chair, there's much to be done, but it is clear that everyone has the same vision: enhance the visitor experience in the U.S. Capitol. Throughout my career, I have learned one thing. During each person's visit to a museum, art gallery, exhibit, there is at least one awe moment, an experience or sight that literally takes one's breath away and inspires. My goal is that every person who comes into the CVC will feel welcome, will look up at the Capitol Dome through the skylights, and we will see that model of the Statue of Freedom in the Great Hall and experience that at least one awe moment. Once they experience that moment, we hope they will become engaged, appreciate what we do in the Capitol, understand why the House and the Senate operate the way they do, and celebrate their roles in our representative government. Congress recognized the need in 1998 for the construction of a visitor center to provide greater security for all persons working in or visiting the United States Capitol and a more convenient place in which to learn the work of Congress. In keeping with Congress's intent, along with the increased focus on safety and security, the mission of the CVC is to provide a seamless visitor experience. This experience is enhanced by the ease and comfort by which visitors can move about the CVC, visit the exhibits, and benefit from the level of service and many amenities provided to them for the first time, such as restaurants, restrooms, and orientation theaters. Most importantly, the exhibits and programs about the working and the history of Congress and architecture of the Capitol are designed to inspire generations of Americans about the legislative process and our representative government. With the implementation of a comprehensive tour program, our professional high-trained guides will be able to tailor tours to their audiences, whether there's a large group of Pembroke Pine 8th graders on a class trip, seniors from Chattanooga stopping here as a part of a fall foliage tour, or local architects marveling at the complexities of the underground facility. While it is a decision that will be made by the congressional leadership, not by the AOC, we believe we will serve Congress better by integrating, not eliminating, the staff-facilitated functions into the tour program. We look forward to continuing discussions on the issue with the congressional leadership to come to a final determination on this and many other operational issues over the next several months. During their visit, we intend to help visitors walk a mile in a member's shoes, and staff members can and should accompany their guests to provide additional home tour flavor to the Capitol tour. This experience will begin as soon as visitors enter the CVC. The new orientation film visit the virtual House and Senate chambers and then enter the Capitol, where they will see their representatives and senators in action. As a valuable tool in this process, we will be assisted with listening to devices, headsets that connect visitors to tour guides. The advantages of the technology are many. Visitors can move about freely while still hearing their guide clearly without the distraction of others. This will also greatly reduce the noise level in the Capitol. Most importantly, in the event of an emergency, the guides are able to manage groups, communicate important information, and quickly and effectively lead them for safety if necessary. Madam Chair, the exhibition hall, carved into the white marble are the words, "Out of many, one." Our founding fathers selected these words to describe the coming together of the 13 colonies in one united country. Today, we come together united in our goal to make a visitor to our nation's capital an incredible patriotic, educational, and inspiring experience. I look forward to continuing to work with the subcommittee, our oversight committees, the congressional leadership, and the AOC to make a visit to the Capitol Visitor Center and the United States Capitol the experience of a lifetime. This concludes my statement. I will be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rouse. Chief Morse?
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, Congressman Wamp, members of the subcommittee. With the completion of the Capitol Visitor Center, there will be both the capability and the capacity to welcome large numbers of guests and visitors at any one time to the Capitol. It is anticipated that this new state-of-the-art facility will efficiently process high volumes of guests and visitors and enhance and facilitate their experience in a safe and controlled and monitored environment while maintaining the highest level of security and protection. The Capitol Police has developed an operational plan for its role in supporting this function. In 2005, we developed a comprehensive staffing plan based on a number of CVC operating assumptions that were in effect at that time. Two basic assumptions were, one, that the CVC would operate under the same hours and days of the week as the Capitol building, and two, that the Cannon and Russell's tunnels would be closed to staff-led tours. Under that scenario, we executed an assessment of the posts that would be needed, that we would need to be created to screen visitors, patrol the facility, respond to emergencies and alarms, and staff certain interior locations. Using the assumptions at that time, that staffing analysis resulted in a requirement for 138 officers, 13 sergeants, 3 lieutenants, and 1 captain. For purposes of economy, we also assessed posts that were currently staffed but would be eliminated when the CVC opened. The results of the overall analysis revealed that the final staffing requirements were for an addition of 66 new positions. Toward that goal, in 2006, we hired 45 of the 66, which left us a standing requirement of 21 additional officers. Since that time, there have been various changes in the CVC operating assumptions. To address some of these changes, we have developed additional staffing models. Each scenario provides multiple variables, such as how many days a week the CVC and the Capitol building will be open, how many hours per day, and how staff-led tours might enter the facility. In addition to the original 2005 scenario, we have prepared 2 additional scenarios, which are illustrated in the handouts that were provided with my written testimony. These additional scenarios drive a total staffing requirement between 219 and 243 officers to support both the CVC and the Capitol building. Based on the overall staffing analysis, that translates into a requirement for an additional 119 to 143 additional officers to be added to the roles of the department. Should the decision be made that the Cannon and Russell tunnels would remain open for staff-led tours, utilizing the 2005 staffing assumptions, an additional 10 FTE would be required to support this effort. For FY08, the Department utilized these planning assumptions in preparing its fiscal year budget request to the Congress but decided based on the changing of the opening date for the CVC to wait for to request the remaining 21 sworn officers. And based on the final operating assumptions for the CVC, the department plans to incorporate additional sworn staffing requirements into the FY 2009 budget request. Therefore, FY 2008, we only plan to hire and train only enough officers to offset attrition to our current staffing levels. And should the department receive authorization and funding for an increase to our overall staffing allocations, we will not have the opportunity to train all these recruits in time for the opening of the CVC. Therefore, the increased mission load will need to be met through working of overtime. It is important to note that overtime is an ongoing challenge for the Capitol Police. In FY 07, our personnel worked over 450,000 hours of overtime to sustain mission-critical requirements. The addition of between 80,000 and 160,000 additional hours to support the various CVC operating assumptions will place an increased strain on our personnel that will be a challenge to absorb. I must also be mindful of situations that could develop that would potentially require a significant increase in police operations that may have to be sustained for several weeks or longer. Therefore, I view the option of having officers work additional duty hours only a short-term solution at best. The department remains firmly committed to providing the highest level of security and law enforcement services to the Congress and the staff and visitors. With the continued support of Congress, the department will be able to fully meet the security requirements resulting from the final concept of operations for the CVC. Once again, I'd like to thank you for having me here today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Well, there's, like I said, a lot of different paths we need to travel down today. Ms. Rouse, I'm going to start with you. I can appreciate that you want to set up an experience that helps a constituent or a citizen walk a mile in a member's shoes, but I just want to make sure that the member is walking with them while they do that. So we've had conversations in my office and with Mr. Wamp there as well about staff-led tours, and I think I've already made clear that I'm very concerned, as are literally hundreds of members on the Senate and House side, about preserving staff-led tours. When we met in my office, I asked you to come back with alternative plans to the ones that you were pursuing, which originally my understanding was that your intent was just to pursue the guide-led tours, professional guide-led tours, with at most a staff-hosted experience. That staff-hosted experience, the way it was described to us, would allow a staff person to travel along with a Capitol guide, and because our constituents would have headphones on in order to give them the personalized state-oriented experience that our staff is able to give them, they literally have to tap our constituents on the shoulder to get their attention, to point out state-specific and interesting points that members like to tailor their tours with. That's obviously not a workable experience for our constituents, and the whole overriding concern with preserving staff-led tours is because without ensuring that we have them continue, it is very unlikely under the system that you had designed originally that members would ever, that citizens would ever connect with their own member unless they went out of their way. So can you describe I assume you brought alternative plans with you today, and if you would describe those plans, and then we can get into some give and take about that.
I will be happy to do that, and I'll start with sort of a baseline, if that's all right. Pretty much the building was designed, and the way that the leadership and the oversight sort of engaged the idea was there was 4 key factors they were trying to work through, and those key factors have been reflected here. We wanted to be able to prevent there being capacity issues that the fire marshal would rightfully call us on, so that was number one. The second issue that we were trying to deal with was visiting the Capitol and making sure that there was trained emergency personnel there and that people could communicate, because that's always a clear issue. We also wanted to reduce the feeling of overcrowdedness and be able to choreograph tour routes. If most of you have been in the Capitol during peak times, and you know can be a little intensity in the building, and also that lends itself to not being able to communicate very well in the case that there is a problem. And the final issue is we wanted to make sure that the people who wanted to come to the CVC could be accommodated and they could start the experience with the theater, which was our way of pacing people through the experience if they wanted to take a tour. Keeping in mind that the CVC itself will be a public building and anyone can come in and not necessarily take a tour. So those were the baselines. In this, anyone who was a constituent who was a pre-arrival could come using our advanced ticketing system, and we'll talk about that later, and they could either in person or on the telephone be in their member's office. They could come to their member's office, they could be in person or on the phone, they can get a booking in the theater, because the idea was people would come to the theater first. So the operation plan was all developed around starting the experience through the theater as a way of pacing people for safety reasons and on appropriate routes to prevent the four things that I talked about. So that's the biggest, that was the assumption, that's the way the building was set up, that's the operation structure. And yes, included in that was the fact that we would have tours of 40 people who would drop out of the theater or up the theater actually every 20 minutes, every 10 minutes on a schedule, and they would pulse their way through the building. The two alternatives that we presented to the chair and also provided for information to the leadership and to Oversight was sort of a moderation of those ideas. But in our mind, we were still trying to have people start in the theater. So scenario one was the idea of having the constituents still make their arrangements through the members' offices through the advanced ticketing system. And we thought of having a...
Can I interrupt you for a quick question on the reservation system?
Yes, ma'am.
Because now there are some constituents that can go through the guide service, but most people, in order to have a tour, come through their member's office. Will constituents under your either proposal only be able to make a reservation through their member, or will they be able to make a reservation some other way?
The answer to the question is they will be able to make their reservation in multiple ways. The total control for all of the advanced ticketing system is now going to be given to Congress through their members' offices. That's the whole way we designed the advanced ticketing system, is that the members' offices get total control. What we then also created a portal, because we will parcel out the amount of tickets that are available on a given day. So the public is also able to book in certain tickets, and we're hoping in our ticketing system they will also be able to know by the state or by the district who their representatives are. Our goal is to constantly be communicating to people about the role of Congress in their lives. That's our goal.
But, I mean, I'm sorry, because I'm trying
that's
to
all right.
keep everybody focused on the time, but, so I'm a constituent in the 20th District of Florida, and I'm coming to Washington, D.C., and I want a Capitol tour. In order to do that, is the only way that I can get a Capitol tour, is the only way for me to contact Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office to make a reservation through their advanced ticket reservation system in their office.
That is not the only way.
Well, what are the other ways?
The other way would be for a person to go to call their office, to go through our advanced ticketing system on the internet.
Call the member's office?
And call the member's office, go through the advanced ticketing system and do it online. Or they can call their member's office and that person can go online and do it for them. In scenario one that we were proposing, someone could come to your office and say they want a tour, but you could then book, in this scenario, a tour with one of your staff people doing it. Essentially, another screen would come up and you would let us know, because we have to monitor for the police as well, the capacity that you're going to have your staff person do this tour a year from now at 4 o'clock.
With X number of people.
With X number of people. So we would know, because what we're essentially doing is booking you a seat in the theater. So
Right.
that's how scenario one, an extra screen would come up. And also,
But if they do it on, let's say they go to your web portal and they don't call my office and they don't make the connection through my website, which I assume is how they can make a reservation.
that would be one way of doing it, yes.
Through a member's website, and they go on your website and do it on their own, how do they get connected to their member for a staff-led tour?
if they wanted to do, what we're proposing, and it's not done yet, that there are buttons there that someone could opt to. You want a staff-led tour through your member's office, you can click that button. You want to just take a tour, just be a regular tour member, you could do that.
Through a guide-led tour.
Through a guide-led tour. We also could provide, and our service component of this is that when someone prints out their ticket, they'll print it out with enough supporting information that they know the reason why they're doing this. It's the U.S. Capitol, and these are their elected officials, and what they should anticipate during that experience. So our level, what we're trying to do is communicate with people thoroughly. With this one scenario, yes, the constituent would still book through the separate screen, but they would come and they could do a tour on their own. So someone from your office has used a separate screen, they booked a seat. Instead of going out with the regular tour guides, they will go up the stairs and then they go out on their tour on their own. What my hesitation is with that is that we have people out without headphones, so we don't have a way of communicating with them, and we can't anticipate when they're coming back.
By on their own, you mean without a staff
Without a
person from a
staff,
member's office?
that was one of the scenarios that we proposed, that they would book a seat in the theater, a staff person. They would see the screen, they see the 13-minute film, which is really quite wonderful. They would go out on their own, but we would not know when they were coming back into the CVC.
Well, I don't know why, I don't want to dominate the time, but I don't know why we don't let people walk through traipse through the Capitol on their own without either a staff person or a Capitol guide now. I don't know why we would do that in the CVC.
What I'm saying is that the staff person would go out on a tour on their own at their own pace, so we wouldn't know at the CVC when they were coming back, which then impacts the number of people that we will then be able to send on into the Capitol for a tour. That's the reason for the pacing. So yes, using this particular scenario, a staff person or a member staff person could go out and do the tour on their own, but we just wouldn't know when they were coming back. The guides, we know when they're coming back, so we can release the next group to go out on the tour. So that's scenario one. Scenario two is the total customized experience. That would be pretty much the CVC hiring additional staff and guided tour to accompany any members, staff who would want to go out on staff-led tours, and it would cost a commensurate more money to be able to do that. And we just guesstimated, how many more staff people that would be in terms of guides, and it might be an additional 101, but we're not really saying that's a thorough study. We just sort of took a stab at it.
Okay, my time's long since expired. I appreciate the members' indulgence. Mr. Watt?
You're the chairman. I've got 5 construction questions and 3 areas for Ms. Rouse I want to cover, but because you're on this topic right now, I'm going to stay with this topic if I could. Just to say that I've spent quite a bit of time with Vern Ehlers lately talking about this, and he's been meeting with Chairman Brady about this. The most important thing I think we can do here, and there is definitely a way from my perspective to accommodate your concerns and to meet the needs of this team, but the most important thing we can do is reverse the process that most members have in their head, that tour groups would come to their office first and then go through the Capitol. It needs to be that they would go to the Capitol Visitor Center first and ultimately end up in the member's office. If we reverse the mindset, and this is communication, organization, and presentation that we have to do through an educational process with members, and I'm talking about the House, and we can't forget there's the Senate. It's easy to forget, but a lot of people will go to their senator's office. And we have two parties, and there are people from home that will literally go to the person in the Senate or the House from their party first. So not everybody is going to come to my office first or even want to talk to me that they're coming to the Capitol. I'm surprised at that because I give the best tours. But sometimes they go to their senators. And so there are several things in the mix. But the main thing that I see from a security standpoint, we spent, my estimation, at least $100 million extra on security of the CVC since we started. And I don't want to blow any of that money. I want it to be well used. And if we don't keep a good system in place of this experience, we're going to waste some of that security money because at any given point, it's not going to be a good system in terms of evacuation, the fire system goes off, et cetera. But it's really important that people would direct, and we need to all see the 13-minute video because I want every person that comes from my district to see that first. It's that good. It's that important. You start with that, and I got to tell you, the rest of it is really going to be significant because it will absolutely draw you in. And again, I'll repeat publicly what I said. If every American, every citizen of the United States could see that video, Congress's approval rating would quadruple overnight because it is that good about what happens here and how important it is here. But that's what I think we need to do is reprogram, and then there's a way for any member to make darn sure that a staff member can be on that tour and that staff-led tours receive priority in terms of getting through quickly ahead of other groups that are going through the system. And those kind of tweaks could make this work very well and maintain that if the member is with the group, all rules are off. And I hate to say that, but that's the way members are. Member 24/7, if he's got the group, she's got the group, they can do whatever they darn well please, come and go, and that's going to create some problems, but it'll also give the member the understanding that they're a free agent and they're taking the responsibility for the people that are with them. And we need to, and I will help brief members that if you do not go through the process with your group, you're a free agent and you're taking the responsibility for them in the event that there's an evacuation of the Capitol. You better know what to do with them if you're going to take the responsibility for them. So all of that said, that's more of a statement than a question, Ms. Rouse. And so while I'm with you, let me just say a couple of other things because yesterday on the floor, unfortunately during the Emancipation Hall debate, the statement was made that we are categorically removing God from the Capitol. That's not true, and I want that to be clear. I love giving some of David Barton's spiritual heritage tour to the appropriate audiences that come from Tennessee or from other places that are interested in that because it's really unique and there is a spiritual foundation of the Capitol and it's all over the place. But I know of no efforts to remove categorically any reference to God in the Capitol. People can overplay this and we shouldn't underplay this because it's part of it. But you don't have to have it on every single wall for it to be here. And so what I want to say to all the people that are concerned right now about this, and I brought David Barton through recently, and we asked a lot of questions about how many of the recommendations from the previous majority were integrated into the CVC. There are 6-month temporary exhibits that are going to rotate, and that's a great way for us to do things. I think of William Wilberforce and the new movie Amazing Grace and the 200th anniversary of his spiritual journey to, frankly, rid Great Britain of slavery and reform manners, the two things that he sought to do over a period of time. It's now made this incredible movie, and it's important. And those kind of stories can be told about what's happened here, and they should be. But I don't want there to be division over this issue, especially when it's not based on the facts and the realities of it. And I think I know Mr. Ayer's heart, and I think I know Ms. Rouse's heart, and we're going to do this. But we need to do it together, not by creating this division. I just want that on the record. And then the final thing is, I don't want to jump ahead of where Emancipation Hall is going. I do look forward, I know the Library of Congress is back here, I do look forward to the moment when the Great Hall is only the Great Hall in the Library of Congress, which is the way it's been for a century, instead of this room in the CVC. But if we get to Emancipation Hall actually being the name of that, is there a way through the next year that we could think about the statue of Lincoln pulling up the slave from his knees that's in Lincoln Park, being either replicated, Debbie and I talked about this, Madam Chairman and I talked about this, is somehow having that as part of this, because it's that poster that Jesse Jackson Jr. brought to the hearings. It's a picture of the actual statue, which is down the street here, down East Capitol. Extraordinary if that could be brought into this process, because it speaks so loudly to the great emancipator and the actual process of the slave looking up and how powerful that is. I don't know how we could do that, and I'm not looking to spend any more money, but if we can, as we go forward, do that, it would be a very meaningful thing. And with that, that was more of a statement, Madam Chairman, and I'll wait for the questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wamp. Ms. McCollum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a lot's been said about Emancipation Hall and the focus on the terrible, terrible fate that befell Africans when they landed on this soil. But there's another group of Americans that don't feel that they're fully emancipated yet, and that's the Native American Indians. So I think as we talk about honoring the productivity of the African Americans who were brought against their will to this country, who need to be fully engaged in the discussion as we move forward. I'm very concerned about the first Americans here being not part of any discussion. When you go over, Ms. Rouse, when you go over the whole issue of the visitor experience and leadership and the baseline, I know you're focused on life, health, safety, and issue. Outside of having an awe moment when they walk in and do the video, I have to say, as a former person who worked in retail and marketing, I'm not hearing any concern about the person who's consuming this visit, our constituent, too much in here. I'm hearing a lot about being worried about mitigating injury, and that's important to me, very important to me. But as Mr. Honda and I worry about individuals on the 7th floor of the Longworth building, I don't take this issue lightly, but we shouldn't make it to the point that you're in our nation's capital, be afraid, be very afraid for your life, is something that I'm getting a little concerned about with the discussion. The issue of having to have the headphone on in order to evacuate also is like, are you wearing the headphone because the United States Capitol is so dangerous that the only way to your life, health, and safety is this headphone, or is the headphone part of the tour group? I mean, you mentioned both, but I'm just cautioning you that I'm hearing so much of this fear that's being put into being at our Capitol that I'm finding it a little alarming. Currently right now, if a staff member from a member's office would like to receive some history of the Capitol to have a more professional office tour, are you currently aware of how the process works for that member's office?
Yes. Currently, the Guide Service does have a class that they offer for members of staff.
And could you tell me how often that's offered?
I am not sure, and I can provide that for you for the record.
Well, I can tell you it's near impossible for staff to participate in that. And if you're really wanting to integrate the office and really wanting to make the historical points of that, accurate, and to engage the member's office in that, Madam Chair, I think that that's something that we should look into I know my staff has wanted to participate in those, and as we have interns turnover and other individuals, it's rather difficult.
I'd like to add, though, one of the initiatives that we are developing is a training program, and I've been talking aggressively with the acting architect about something that's very prominent in the world that I come from, museum world and visitor service world, is that we train comprehensively our staff. So
I understand. My time is limited, and I understand you're going to get back to us. I do not mean to be rude. I do not mean to be rude. On the fire system, boy, I'm confused. It sounded from the Architect's Capital report, things were going along swimmingly. There's references to interacting with GSA and everything's going good. And then I hear from our Mr. Dorn from GAO concerns about $1 million overruns, not everyone being involved. I was, Madam Chair, I thought it wasn't too long ago when you had told everybody to sit down at the table, work up a plan, work something up, and now it sounds like the architect of the Capitol is going to have to come down on a decision using the best of your experience with all your expertise. What's GSA telling you that you need to do? If Mr. Dorn's correct and you're going to have to make a decision, GSA has a lot of experience in this. What's GSA telling you about the relationship between you and your fire marshal?
GSA is not commenting on that relationship. We asked GSA to look at our plan, to sort of do a peer review of the plan to see if there's any way that we can do it faster and more efficiently. And they've come up with several ideas that they presented to our fire marshal, and he's considering those now. So it's a peer review, it's a partnership. We want to learn from them to be sure, absolutely sure, we're doing the right thing and we're doing it as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
May I ask, Madam Chair, may I ask Mr. Dorn? Mr. Dorn, GSA is now looking at the fire marshal plan, so the fire marshal's going to have the final say. I'm confused. If I heard you correctly, that there's a couple of different ways this decision could be made, fully taking in account to do the best of our ability for life, health, and safety of the employees, the constituents, the members, and then the physical structure. Can you tell me if why you're seeing some confusion and the architect of the Capitol isn't?
The the architect of the Capitol is getting additional opinions. They've a year or so ago they contacted the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, that writes the codes because they didn't agree with all of the testing that the fire marshal wanted to do. I don't know that they got the answer that they wanted to hear. They've talked about trying to get us involved, which is not the right place for GAO. They're talking about, they're talking with GSA, which again, I think it's great to get, this is a very important issue, as you pointed out. And it's good to get a lot of professionals together and come up with the right plan, because professionals do disagree. And there are millions of dollars that are going to be spent on fire alarm testing if we go along with the plan that we've got now. And my understanding from what Stephen said was that GSA has some suggestions that, in their opinion, could save time, which is going to save money. But it ultimately, and it's under the review of the fire marshal, who works for the architect, who is the authority having jurisdiction. And that's my point, is that ultimately the architect's got to make a decision to either go with the way the fire marshal wants to do it now, or go with the other experts who have different opinions.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Mr. Honda?
Good morning, and apologize for being a little tardy here. Couple of questions. Well, let me make a comment first, Madam Chair. You know, I have no problem with the name Emancipation Hall. I wouldn't support and move to remove the presence of the word God. I am a Christian, but we have a opportunity at this point of our history in the capital of this country to provide a platform and a teaching moment of our past, and of our hopes. And part of that hope and part of that promise is embedded in the Constitution, and a lot of it is implied that we have separation of church and state. And I think that there has to be an opportunity where we can talk about those things without denying our history, without denying the leadership of this country and their struggle to separate state from church and the struggle of the different churches to have dominance over this fledgling country. The participation of different folks in this country also needs to be reflected properly. There are not enough pictures that show the construction of this Capitol. And we have to come to grips with how things were done, who did it, in fact, and how much it cost. I think those are honest kinds of expressions of our history. We require that of other countries after World War II. I think we should require no less than ourselves so the future generations will understand who we are, where we came from, and why we should be embracing this thing we call diversity, immigrants, and other people's ability and desires to contribute to this country. Now, having said that, I am concerned about, and I'm not going to ask the question, but I'll just lay it out there, concerned about the diversity of our workforce from the top to the bottom. I understand percentages. They don't mean a thing unless they're disaggregated in those categories. I'm still concerned about the evacuation plans, not only of the Capitol, of the CVC, but of all of our facilities. And you may confer with your peers, you may confer with the fire marshal, but if you don't share those plans prior to being implemented with us, I will be very disappointed. I don't believe in micromanaging, but when there's a lot of things that need to be done, those of us who are responsible need to take the reins a little bit just to make sure that the things of the past are not going to overshadow the kinds of decisions that you may be forced to make. On the workforce of the security, I'd be interested in understanding whether there has been some internal mechanisms and processes by which you ask your own force how things are going, how things can be more efficient. Look at your own structure and ask them in ways that they can make some good input. And then look at your workforce hours. Of course, a lot of you are subjected to our calendar and our timeline, and that's a hell of a thing to do. And that's probably where a lot of your wiggle room is going to be needed. But given that, I think there's some history in the way we behave as a body that you can sort of factor in there. And then look at the assumptions you want to make moving forward and extrapolating the additional hours that you say you need. I'm not going to judge whether it's correct or incorrect. I just want to understand how you did it, how you arrived at those numbers, who you engaged in finding that out. I come from Silicon Valley. A lot of our companies there have learned to do that with themselves and found that they've reached a higher level of efficiency. They engaged their own workers, found that they could save money, save jobs, at the same time produce a product that pleases the public. And I think this is what we're all about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Honda. Chief Morse, I don't want you to think you're going to be able to go to sleep during the hearing, so it'll wake you up a bit. You obviously have a role in ensuring the safety of tours, of visitor tours, and made clear in your statement that you, and in the conversations that I've had with you, that your strong preference is that all visitor entry to the Capitol would begin at the CVC entrance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The concern that I have with that, and that many members have with that, is that during the summer and winter in particular, our constituents' exposure to the elements, even with the consideration that we're going to have a time-stamped entry and that we're going to be planning the number of people that are rolling through the facility at any given time, you know, we're really just guessing at about how many people we think are going to come. And then if you add in Ms. Rouse's marketing plan, which, to be honest with you, until we get a handle on how many people we think are going to come to the new facility, I'm not even sure we should pursue a marketing plan in the immediate future, because we should see who comes on their own and what the increase is like. But there is a risk, a significant one, that our constituents are going to be out in the elements. And we are already several years overdue with the deadline for completion of this project. We are several $100 million over budget as a result of the mistakes that were made prior to this Congress. The last thing in the world that I would want to see happen is lines of constituents who are exposed to the freezing cold, to the rain, to the snow, to the heat. I mean, already we have people passing out in the summertime because they're having to stand outside to wait to get in the Capitol. So while I understand the security, we can't turn the Capitol into a bunker. This is still the representative institution of, you know, the most democratic institution, the most representative institution in the world. So my question for you is, focus a little bit on why you're recommending that all tours come through the main CBC entrance. But you mentioned in your statement that really, in order to keep the Russell and Cannon tunnels open, you really only need about $1 million more in order to be able to do that. Is that right? And then, secondly, in terms of security, we have magnetometers at the Cannon entrance, the Cannon tunnel entrance, but there are no magnetometers at the Russell tunnel entrance. So we secondarily screen people coming into the Capitol on the House side, and we don't on the Senate side. So I just, you know, your focus on security is appreciated, and I understand it, and I don't want to minimize it, but we can't turn the Capitol into a bunker. So if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for the question. And there were 3 areas that I can comment on there. First, the design itself of the CVC and the main entrances were designed specifically for high volumes of people and screening. So we are capable, both from a technology standpoint and a design standpoint, in the tactical positioning of officers, to receive and screen thoroughly large volumes of visitors. And it's done in a very welcoming environment. So that is why the CVC main entrance is the best security location.
If I can just interrupt you for 1 second, but there is only so much space in that lobby area leading into the magnetometer screenings.
Right.
And I could easily see, even though there are 2 lobbies on either side, the Senate and the House side, spill over out the doors and up that plaza way with lines of people standing in the elements.
Right. One of the things that we have an issue with, which is just as concerning to me, both from a security standpoint and from an element standpoint, is that over 400,000 staff-led tours or staff visitors on staff-led tours went through the tunnel systems just between January and August of '07. Those tunnels are not designed for that level of people to be packed in there in lines. It's hot, the lighting's poor, it's claustrophobic to some people. We've had medical emergencies there. It is not conducive to the level of screening that we're talking about. It is not the location that we should be screening visitors into the building or subjecting them to that.
My time's limited also, and I agree with you, but I'm not suggesting, and I don't think most members are suggesting, that the CVC main entrance not be the main route. But if we have a staff-led tour scenario, the opportunity, particularly in bad weather, and we're going to know when there's bad weather, to bring those staff-led tours through the tunnels as an alternative to people standing in the weather is something that I think should be allowed.
I would, you know, my position as chief is to give you the best security recommendation, the one that provides the most expedient and welcoming environment to give us the highest level of security. That is the opening the front doors of the CVC. The tunnel systems are just simply not designed to screen the level of people that we have to screen.
Then let me just ask you, why do we have magnetometer screening on the Cannon Tunnel side and not on the Russell Tunnel side? Are we more important than the Senate? Do we not care about safety and security on the Senate side?
The same level of screening is conducted on the Senate side as we do on the House side. The difference is, and this is a difference that is directed to us, is that on the Senate side, it's done manually. So in other words, the same prohibited items list is enforced. The same screening procedures are administered. It's just, in some cases, not technology. It's manual search by the officers. And that is a preference that they have for security. It is not optimum when you have technologies that can, assist with screening. But we are able to thoroughly search at the same level and under the same restrictions that we do on the House side.
My time's expired.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, Ms. McCollum.
But on this point, talking about the weather and that, at any given time during the week in my office, because of what you can and cannot bring through, I have strollers, I have diaper bags, I have coats, I have mittens, I have umbrellas in my office. Sometimes they're actually in my office, which is fine. But I don't know where all this is going to go, and then in the future, I mean, people from Minnesota, when we bring a winter coat, we bring a winter coat. And to
Ms.
leave it
McCollum,
and
I'm
to leave
sorry.
it on.
I don't want to infringe on Mr.
I
Watt's
know,
time.
but I think that's a big part of why people come to our offices.
The personal service and the connection to the member is the most essential thing. We would sanitize the process if we eliminate that ability to serve our constituents, and we are the ones that are going to hear about it if they're frying or freezing in the elements in the event that they only have one entry point. And security aside, Mr. Wamp.
Try to quickly go through my construction questions. Mr. Ayers, as I've gone through basically monthly this year, I've seen some areas that do not count on the contractor substantial completion requirement. And I was surprised it looked like some of those areas, like stairwells, lagged in terms of construction completion. How are those areas going, Mr. Unger, Mr. Ayers, in terms of making sure that even when we get substantial completion, that we don't have too much more construction going on while we're trying to fire test?
Certainly the two areas that are in question are the north and south atria stairs, and those stairs are in fact progressing well. The north stair is nearly complete. The terrazzo stair treads have been installed, and we're working on the stone at the lower level. The handrails may have another week or two, but I expect that stairwell to be complete in very short order. On the south side, we have crews working in there now. We've not yet started the stone work on the lower level. Maybe Bernie can tell us when we expect both of those to be fully complete?
Mr. Wamp, I think the stair on the House side will probably be done in a month or so. They still have quite a bit of work to do there, but I think they're, as Mr. Ayers said, they are going to finish very shortly with most of the work on the Senate side. And those are things that we knew about in advance because it's a difficult area to work in, and we knew that they would be a little later.
Thanks. And Tom's in the back of the room, but many of the times I've asked about technology installation, and a lot of it can't take place until the contractor's off the job. Is all the technology installation in line to be put in a timely manner, and are there any big glitches in technology that have taken place? Because I'm concerned about that, too, meeting the fire marshal's schedule for testing.
I'm not aware of any glitches along the way. Bernie?
Mr. Wamp, the follow-on work is going to begin on the 16th. I think the work you're talking about is the auxiliary work for the House and Senate, audiovisual and so forth.
Right.
And we had asked those folks to discontinue their effort so that we could keep the ceilings closed and get to substantial completion. But the agreement is, once we reach substantial completion, they're going to resume.
One other issue, the Embassy Suites, not too far from here, had a skylight collapse, and I know that's a whole different level of construction, but are we absolutely confident with our systems that there's a lot of beautiful apertures where you're looking through glass at the dome, and they're big, and I'm just making darn sure here that while we're spending $621 million, we've got the kind of systems that under no circumstance, snow or otherwise, that we would ever have any kind of breakdown in the integrity of our construction systems. Bernie?
As far as we know, Mr. Wamp, they should be fine. They're designed and constructed to withstand impact, in case of various events, so we should be in good shape there.
We also have a protective mechanism to keep one from falling to the floor should one break or fall.
The chairwoman and I are going to agree on fire alarm testing and insistence of getting this resolved quickly and getting Ken in a position to where we don't have delays and we can all move this process forward. So that's kind of a big exclamation mark right now that we're going to agree to, and I'll let her handle that. And then one final question is, I know you mentioned it, but go back a minute on change orders and how are we doing on getting all that resolved here in a timely manner?
Good, Bernie.
Mr. Trump, we're proceeding at the pace we have been. Again, as we said, we've basically worked an arrangement out with all the contractors to prioritize the changes that we need to process and make sure that we get the most critical ones first. And that's what we're doing. We still have around 340 that we have to process. Most of those are over half are under $20,000. It will take some time to work them out, but again, we have processes in place to address the critical ones so they won't affect anybody inadvertently.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to ask. It's not going to slow us down. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wamp. Mr. Honda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The previous comments I made on diversity, I like a written response on that. The workforce calculation, I like a written report on that if you would. It doesn't have to be a dissertation, just what it is. The comment you made about security and using the CVC entrance for the main entrance, when I'm listening to my colleagues, I start to think that what you're saying is that all our staff guided tours are going to have to go from our offices to the CVC through that process and then go through their tour. Is that correct?
That is one option that I have seen presented as far as wayfinding of people. But I also heard another option this morning that the tour begin at the CVC and that they go through the front entrance first and then proceed to the various buildings across the campus.
Okay, so the answer is yes, but?
The answer is that I recommend that all visitors and official visitors go through the.
Okay, your recommendations, and I'm trying to work this thing, is based upon one assumption that you have a mission of security and safety for everybody that goes through CVC that's in there under your purview. That's a good mission statement. I think you have to look at the mission statement and then ask yourself, not assume that the CVC is the only entrance, but ask yourself, who are our clients first? Then how do we deal with that in the context of security? Now, if the members and the senators are part of your constituency, then I think you have to look at that and figure out how it's being done and what are some of the assumptions being made. Again, looking at assumptions again. I don't know if there, this is not to be funny, but I don't know how many housewives and parents you use to look at your plan and say, take it apart. When I planned a school one time, I had the janitor, the teachers, the students, and every constituent in our community come out, look at our school plans and then make their input. And then it worked better than when the architect took his pen to paper to design a school that look good on the outside.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Honda, I just want to say that I'm going to encourage my constituents, and I do hundreds of these tours, to go to the CVC first because they'll only have to go through security one time. If they come to my office, they're going to go through security 3 times. 3 times they come to my office first. There's no way to get around it. That's the way the Capitol's set up. If they go to the CVC first, one time. They can end up in my office as long as they want to stay, and I'm going to encourage them to come to my office after we meet them there and go through the tour. One's better than 3.
Reclaiming my time, thank you. What we want to do is give our folks choices. They can choose to go there, or you can choose to tell them to meet you there. But many of them want to come to our offices first. I think those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to be as flexible as possible in the name of those who visit us. And not to make security unimportant, but we design our own homes to be secure at the same time to be livable too. So I like to have that. And then I heard about the fire alarm and how we're going to let people know that there's a state of emergency. I have not seen, as of yet, a good evacuation plan. Do we have an evacuation plan?
For the CVC,
For the CVC is a good start.
yes, for the CVC, we are working on operational plans to
And
not
what-
only evacuate the building, but also shelter in place and lock down and defend if that were necessary.
And so what are the components or the factors that you use to say it's going to work? I mean, what are your expectations?
Well, our expectations is, one, to be able to monitor, first is to screen, people coming into the building, to monitor the flow of people, to have an organized movement of people through the building that we can account for, so that in the event of an emergency, we can respond and coordinate those evacuations or sheltering that need to take place. And
So that's ingress. What's egress?
egress is the same as principles that we use at the Capitol. You can't pre-plan an evacuation and have people go to the same place every
Well,
single time.
thank you very
because
much.
Situations
I
do
accept
change.
that. Then how do you, what's the mechanism you have to be able to monitor and understand where your people are, and how do you know that in real time? What is your mechanism for understanding who is where and how many people you have, what avenues you have that are safe and that are not safe, so that you can guide them in real time to what's your mechanism?
Well, we actually have several mechanisms. One is through, working with our partners as far as the movement of people through the CVC.
What is the technology? I mean, you haven't, go ahead.
Mr. Honda, if you can let the chief answer, and then your time will have expired.
Well, there's actually several factors, not all just technology, but they're certainly what we're talking about today, and working with our partners and organizing the flow of people through the CVC is very, very important. We also have pedestrian monitoring systems which tell us the capacity of the Capitol building, and will also tell us the capacity of the CVC. So we know the load level of both buildings. We have video camera systems. We have officers who are positioned and strategically posted throughout the building. And we have a very robust command center that monitors situations throughout the day, 24 hours a day.
So you can monitor people in real time, in two-way communication, and be able to direct traffic from one place.
Yes, and we do that in coordination with an incident command system, which all our officers, officials are trained in.
Gentleman's time has expired. Here's how, I'm going to say one final thing and then move on, because I've got a couple other things I want to cover as well. There are a number of concerns when it comes to staff-led tours and tours in general. The quality of the experience and the content that is communicated to our constituents. So we obviously want to make sure that is factual and interesting and holds their attention and enhances their experience. All of that is possible with a staff-led tour. And to me, the only hurdles to accomplishing that with a staff-led tour is beefing up the training, which we can certainly do, giving our staff the evacuation and emergency training that is needed. We all have emergency coordinators in our office that are aware and are responsible for helping to direct our staff and our constituents that are in our office at the time of an emergency out of the buildings that they're in. We can do that. We need to make sure that we protect our constituents from the elements, because no matter what you plan for, I have visions of constituents spilling out of that lobby onto that plaza way and standing in the elements, which we cannot allow to happen. And we need to make sure that security is considered, balanced with, just like after the tragedy with the shootings of the Capitol Police officers, balanced with the acknowledgement and recognition that this is a representative institution that we cannot turn into a bunker. All of that is possible. And I think the plans need to be put in place with all of those things in mind. Security is important, and I don't think we should be sending 400,000 constituents through the tunnels. I understand what you're saying, Chief. I can appreciate what your intention is, but we can strike a balance, and that's what needs to occur. Mr. Womp's suggestion that all tours begin at the CVC main entrance, I have to tell you, I would be concerned that most of the time the constituent would not end up back at their office, at our office, because by the time they're done with the tour, unless it's a staff-led tour, if the staff meets them at the CVC main entrance and brings them through and then brings them back to our office, great. But unless it's in the plans for a capital guide to do that, a capital guide, especially one with 40 people in their group, is going to have different members' constituents in the same group.
Will you please yield? I just want to clarify. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Staff-led tours.
Okay.
And it won't be all of them, because if it's 3 or 4 people, then I'll handle that. But, I mean, if it's a large group, I'm going to encourage them to go over there. And that's the kind of paradigm shift. And I just think members ought to think about that. If they'll think about it, then they'll say, hey, man, that might be good, because then you don't have to have umbrellas and everything for everybody, because we designed this for this purpose.
And the one thing that I do agree is that all the tours should begin in the theater. I mean, I don't think that we should be going willy-nilly all over the Capitol at different times and not having this be coordinated the way you envision it. I just think there needs to be the staff-led element intact, and we have the ability to accomplish that, considering security, considering quality, and considering the number of people that are in the building. And I would strongly urge you to continue to beef up those plans in order to do that. And I am going to be communicating with the leadership, as will, I know Chairman Obie, who is extremely concerned about this issue and agrees that staff-led tours should be, and feels very strongly about staff-led tours remaining in place. Moving past that, the thing that is hanging over this hearing that is the most disturbing is the fire marshal's testing plan. And that's going to be part of the homework that we assign at the end. You know, I'm very happy and excited that tomorrow is November 15th and we've reached a substantial completion date, and that the next stage of the fire marshal's testing is going to begin. That's wonderful. We still have the issue of the parts of the CVC that are not finished, that were not included in that anticipation of that substantial completion date. We have to make sure that those stay on track. And my understanding is that is on track for February or so of 2008, correct, Mr. Unger?
Correct.
Okay. What we need to do is we need to have some decisions firmly made, decided, pick a course of action, be confident in that course of action, and then focus on meeting it. Spending a lot of time doing a lot of hand-wringing over whether we're going to make the right decision and end up with a result that we don't like is unacceptable. So we're going to need to focus on getting that done. What is the obstacle to that?
Excuse me, I didn't.
What is the obstacle to making the decisions that need to be made in order to do what Mr. Dorn said, which is make some decisions in the immediate future so that it doesn't affect the November 2008 opening?
Right, ma'am. Right now, there is no obstacle. We have an active process in place. We have just gotten GSA's input. They've made a number of suggestions. We've met with the fire marshal and his office. They're in the process of looking at those suggestions. We have discussed informally with the Office of Compliance this issue, and, you know, they're knowledgeable about it. In fact, there's a meeting that's planned for Friday, you know, about this. So
When do you anticipate the decision being made on a contractor, on the length of time it's going to take, and on how it's going to impact the overall cost? And is that overall cost going to affect the $621 million agreed-upon final upper limit of the number?
Madam Chair, the concern we have right now is that the plan that's in place, you know, is at risk of affecting the $621 million and the time frame. That's why, you know, we're all trying to come together on a plan that would be very reachable within the time frame and be well within the budget. And that's what our target is.
When do you anticipate being able to do that?
Hopefully by next week, if not this week. But we do want to make sure that the relevant stakeholders are involved, knowledgeable, and that we're in agreement across the board with how we're going to proceed.
Mr. Dorn?
It sounds like Bernie agrees with me on what needs to be done. Sooner rather than later, I think, is the optimal word. They have re-advertised again to get help, and that's great. Now it'll come down to what are we going to tell that help to do, because the contract that we've anticipate letting now is time and materials, which is, you know, it's a blank check if you don't know what you're doing. So we need to get that scope defined and narrow that down as much as reasonable, again, with the codes considered.
So the immediacy that you referred to in your opening statement, does that mean by next week?
It needs to be done. Well, the fire marshal intended to start his fire alarm acceptance testing on the 16th. I think they will be doing that with the damper testing. Mm-hmm. The labor that this contract would require is, does that start in January?
That would start in January, Madam Chair.
So they've got a little bit of time, you know, understanding that procurement doesn't happen overnight. So we got a little bit of time for this decision to be made, but it needs to be done soon.
Okay. On change orders, I'm glad Mr. Wamp covered it. I want to just ask a follow-up. Mr. Wamp and I read the reports that we've asked you to provide us with they are all very detailed, so that we are as knowledgeable as we can be about what's going on a day-to-day basis. And at the bottom of every one of those reports is a description of the current change orders that have come in for the week and the ones that have been resolved. And the last few weeks, I think 3 of them have had more change orders resolved than change orders opened. At least one of them has had the reverse. Are we at a point now where, for the most part, we are closing out more change orders than we're opening?
At this point, generally, that is the case. However, we're also approaching a new phase of this effort, which we're going to have, we're starting to have our final acceptance testing. And it's my view that we are going to be asked by the Fire Marshal's Office to make some changes, or they're going to find some problems. So we're going to have some more change orders in order to fix those. Hopefully they will not be extensive, but my anticipation is that we will be having, you know, to continue to process these until the acceptance testing is complete.
What's the current value of the open change orders?
I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million if you include, these are potential change orders now, not change orders per se.
I'm talking about the open change orders.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Somewhere in the neighborhood of over $50 million if you include delay-related issues. I can't get very specific about the breakdown, but it's the bulk of that, by the way, does relate to changes other than discretionary, very few discretionary changes.
And do you think you have the situation with change orders under control so that it doesn't balloon out of control and become a problem that affects the critical path?
Yes, ma'am. We have processes in place that we can authorize work immediately, basically, and what that would do is it would also enable the contractor to bill immediately as they complete the work. So where that process is appropriate and necessary, we are basically following it.
Okay.
Will the chair yield on this
Yeah,
point?
no, I'll yield to the gentleman.
Just to reconfirm what I think I heard in a previous hearing, that the change orders in dispute are part of the $621 million total. So these, nothing is in excess, so that anyone reporting on this hearing understands that.
That's correct.
An excellent and important point. Mr. Honda? Okay. Mr. Wamp, do you have any other questions? There's one that I want to ask about the plaza status, because that is obviously something we're going to have to deal with down the road. Can you give us an update on the East Front Plaza, Mr. Unger? What's left to be done to finish it? Where are we on the issue of the cracks? When do we expect the work to be completed? And, you know, I know that you've done some work on that lately, so can you give us an update?
Madam Chair, the plaza work is proceeding. What our game plan is for the eggs is to basically, fairly shortly, our contractor will be moving trailers from the house egg and over, I presume, over here to the around the Senate side, and they will begin to finish that area over the next several months, and it'll probably be spring before it's totally done. But in terms of the paver issue, which you've noted, we are in the process of having a consultant come and look at that issue, make some judgments as to what the causes of the problem are, and once we have that consultant's report, then we will proceed to have the repairs made in accordance with the findings of that. So we don't want to really disturb the plaza at this point by making the changes until we have that report in hand.
Thank you very much. As we wrap up, I want to, again, congratulate the whole team on the progress that you've made. You know, sitting here on November 14th, we're in much better shape than we were when the 110th Congress began and this committee was reconstituted. So I appreciate all the hard work and effort that everybody has been putting in, and particularly appreciate the bipartisan support and interaction that I've had with you, Mr. Wamp. I do want to stress, Ms. Rouse, we have 148 members that have signed a Dear Colleague in support of the continuation of staff-led tours, and 41 senators. So the mandate that you have from the membership is very clear. The comment that I saw from you, even after the conversation that we had in my office in the article about staff-led tours, I think earlier this week, still seemed to be clinging to the notion of primarily driving our visitors through a capital guide service. That is clearly not what the members want, and it is a pervasive feeling throughout the Congress. So I would ask you again to develop a plan, several options is fine, for staff-led tours that can address all of the concerns, security, content, evacuation and emergency, and anything else that needs to be considered, so that we can preserve the members' ability to interact with our constituents. It would be horrible, in my view, if we simply turned the Capitol visitor experience into a walk through a museum. The Capitol is not the Smithsonian. It is not even the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial. It is the Capitol. It is a living, breathing, vibrant institution, and it is a completely different experience than any other tour experience that a citizen has or a constituent has coming through here. And it should be treated as such, and the plans for tours should be developed with that in mind. On the fire marshal, the homework that I want to assign is twofold. In light of the concerns with the fire marshal's testing plan, one, that the plan is not finalized, two, that it is not coordinated with other parties like the Office of Compliance, and three, that the plan's procedures are not yet clear. I would like and would direct the architect to resolve those issues by this time next week, by next Wednesday, before we leave for the Thanksgiving break. I'm talking about the plans and the coordination, not the contract, obviously. I'd like you to submit a plan to the committee explaining how those issues have been resolved. The fire marshal has done, a whole lot of contemplating on the subject, and I can appreciate the depth of and significance of how much has to be decided. And no one wants a wrong decision to be made, but a decision does need to get made, and we're going to push you to make it. It's got to be finalized. The plan has to be coordinated, and it has to have clear procedures if we're going to keep the project on track, and that's our role in this subcommittee. As I noted earlier, the project team is going to successfully meet tomorrow's substantial completion deadline. That is great news, but we still have a year to go before the CVC opens, and we need to make sure that we don't get complacent. It's not time to throw a party. It's time to make sure that we stay focused and driven and singularly focused on meeting the plan for opening the CVC next November. With that in mind, by this time next month, I want the architect of the Capitol to submit an assessment of the major remaining tasks, major remaining risks to the CVC's projected opening. This assessment should identify those risks, the likelihood that they'll happen, and the potential impacts to the project if they do occur. It should also include mitigation strategies to help avoid or minimize any potential negative impacts, and I will tell you that I appreciate that you do usually anticipate those and discuss mitigation in the weekly reports that you give us, but we kind of want an overall comprehensive long-term view. And hopefully that assessment will be a useful tool to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep this project on track. Mr. Watt?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. This could be homework as well, but I do think between here and there, as we're working through the possibility of hours of operation, and we're talking about expanding the 9 to 4 original schedule and possible Saturdays and everything, we need a good grasp for long-term projections and operational cost of the difference in cost of security and personnel of the new hours recommended versus what was originally planned, so that we can responsibly look out into the future as to what this really means in terms of the responsibilities of the subcommittee of funding all these various important components. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Wamp, we do have some information that the chief has outlined for us. I actually have it in my book here that we can give to you, which the chief's laid out the different costs based on the hours, how many FTEs he'd need. And so if what we have already that I thought you would have isn't enough, then we can ask him to enhance that.
I just think we need to discuss it publicly and not just privately.
I see. Okay. We can take that up at the next hearing. With that, the subcommittee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair. Stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair, whatever the term is. Thank you.